Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're jumping right into a Supreme Court decision that really gets to the heart of qualified human trafficking in our digital world. This whole case boils down to one critical question. Where is the line between a legal police trap and illegal police inducement?
All right, we're going to tackle this just like a formal case digest. First, we'll lay out the facts, then we'll get into the legal fight, and finally, we'll cover the verdict and the major principles that came out of it. Let's get started. Okay, so first up, the facts of the case, as laid out by the court. This whole thing kicked off with a tip from U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. That single tip sparked a months-long investigation that ended in a very deliberate entrapment operation. So you can see how things progressed. The tip came in November 2013. By January, an undercover officer was in contact with the suspect, Rodriguez. Now, this is a really important point that the court zeroed in on. It was Rodriguez who first offered a nude show with minors. That wasn't suggested by the police. This pattern kept going right into February, and it all led to a plan to meet this supposed foreign friend at a hotel. The night of the planned meetup, February 13th, Rodriguez starts sending these text messages to the police informant who was playing the role of Kyle. And these texts, well, they became absolutely crucial pieces of evidence showing exactly what his intentions were. And this message right here became a cornerstone of the prosecution's case. Why? Because it just blows up any argument that this was some innocent meeting. By specifically mentioning a young boy and a lady boy, Rodriguez himself confirms the whole plan was about sexual exploitation. There's no ambiguity there. The operation itself was executed by the book. The police set up the hotel room, they had their confidential informant ready, and they prepared marked money that was dusted with fluorescent powder. So when Rodriguez showed up with the 14-year-old victim and took that cash, the signal was given and the arrest team moved in. It was a classic sting. Okay, so that covers the facts. Now let's pivot from what happened on the ground to the legal battle that happened in the courtroom. This is where we get into the core issues, where the defense really tried to poke holes in the prosecution's case. The absolute bedrock of Rodriguez's defense was this claim of instigation. He basically argued the police didn't just catch me, they talked me into it. It was their idea. And that distinction is everything in the law. Entrapment is a perfectly legal way to catch a criminal. Instigation, on the other hand, is illegal and gets you acquitted. It all comes down to a simple question: whose idea was it? So building on that main claim, the defense tried to create a domino effect. They argued that if the arrest was illegal instigation, then everything that came from it, the marked money, the phone, was fruit of the poisonous tree and couldn't be used as evidence. They also went after the chat logs, saying they were a violation of privacy, and even claimed the prosecution couldn't prove what was said in the hotel room. And really, this is what the entire case hangs on. The court had to figure out, was Rodriguez an unwary innocent who was tricked into committing a crime, or was he an unwary criminal who was already planning to break the law and just happened to walk right into a police trap? So, after all the evidence was presented and all the arguments were made, what did the Supreme Court decide? Let's get right to the verdict. Guilty. The Supreme Court found Yul Vincent Rodriguez guilty beyond a reasonable doubt of qualified trafficking in persons. The court didn't just agree with the Regional Trial Court and the Court of Appeals. It affirmed their decisions, finding no real merit in the defense's appeal. But a guilty verdict is just the end of the story. The most important part is understanding why the court came to that conclusion. So now let's unpack the ratio decidendi, the legal reasoning behind the decision. To figure out if it was entrapment or instigation, the court used what's known as the subjective test. This is a really interesting legal standard because it's not about what the police did. Instead, it's all about what was going on in the mind of the accused. The big question is, was this person already inclined to commit this crime before the police ever showed up? It's a key protection for innocent people, but it also allows police to catch actual criminals. And when the court applied that test, they found the evidence of predisposition was just overwhelming. You had the victim's own testimony about 20 previous shows. You had the fact that Rodriguez made the first offer to the undercover officer. He was the one who pushed the plan to go to the hotel. And those text messages showed he was more than just a participant. He was eager. The court was clear. The criminal idea started with him. The court also just went down the list and knocked down the defense's other arguments one by one. Right to privacy? Nope. The Data Privacy Act allows for this when determining criminal liability. Anti-wiretapping law? Doesn't apply. That law is about tapping phone lines, not recording Skype calls.
And as for the chat logs, the court said they weren't even used to prove the specific crime of that night, but to show his pattern of behavior, his modus operandi. Now, this case was bigger than just one person's verdict. It was also an opportunity for the court to reinforce some incredibly important legal doctrines, especially when it comes to protecting children. The court found that this was a textbook case of qualified trafficking. Rodriguez transported a person, the victim, for the clear purpose of sexual exploitation. And here's the key. Because the victim was a minor, the crime was automatically qualified. The victim's age, just 14, was the critical, undeniable fact. Under the law, that single detail elevates the crime to its most severe form. It doesn't matter what else was happening. The victim's age makes it qualified trafficking. And this quote right here might be the most powerful legal doctrine in the whole case. The court is making it crystal clear. When we're talking about child exploitation, the idea of consent is off the table. It is legally irrelevant. The law says a minor simply cannot consent to their own abuse. End of story. And that all brings us to the final judgment, what the court ultimately decided to do and the penalties they imposed. The court dismissed the appeal entirely. The conviction was affirmed. This was the final word. For the crime, Rodriguez received a sentence of life imprisonment. On top of that, he was ordered to pay a 2 million peso fine, plus another 600,000 pesos in moral and exemplary damages directly to the victim. You know, a case like this is a stark reminder of how law enforcement has to adapt to crimes that start in the digital world but end in the real one. And it really leaves us with a huge ongoing question. How do our laws and how do our policing strategies keep evolving to shield the most vulnerable people in a world that is moving more and more online?